Hello everyone, welcome back to another Roman Reacts. We're here today to watch another video for you. This one is continuing with the Black Crusade series from Wizards and Warriors. I do apologize this has not been able to come up a little bit earlier, just I had a few other videos that I was doing reactions to, so I couldn't get to that right away. But we're back, we're going to be doing, continuing till the rest of the series is caught up, and then we'll just have to wait and see what the next videos will come out for Wizards and Warriors. So without further ado, let's just get to it, okay? All right, so we got that set and everything's all good. So I do look forward to what this is going to be. So yeah, the First Siege of Cadia is the name, and it's so crazy to me how, like, no matter what you look at, no matter how much you think about it, there's so many different events that take place at around the same time, and like you're just trying to catch up to how everything culminated to how Abaddon was able to gain power, and basically all this chaos was going around, yet the Imperium could not figure out what Abaddon was going to be doing. So it's the lore of Warhammer is just nuts. So let's just continue with it, okay?
For the first time since the Horus Heresy, the forces of Chaos had a new War Master. After 10 years of ceaseless slaughter across Imperial space, Abaddon the Despoiler had claimed the demon blade Dracnien and replaced his father as the head of the traitor legions. As it stood, no other heretic Astartes commanded as much authority as Ezekiel, the former first captain, now meant to wield his newfound power to slowly bleed the empire he once helped create. Welcome to our latest episode of Warhammer 40k, the Black Crusade, in which Ezekiel's warpath will lead him to the fortress world of Cadia. After rising to the challenges of the Tower of Silence, Abaddon the Despoiler finally achieved his goal. The first Black Crusade was a resounding success, and the newly appointed War Master could finally recall his troops before attrition losses became too high. The Black Legion forces thus withdrew from the Segmentum Obscurus as swiftly as they had appeared. The Imperial defenders were left dumbstruck at this latest development. Although the Loyalists had finally managed to respond to the incursion, they had never realized Abaddon's true intent. As a result, no one could understand why the Despoiler would suddenly abandon the fight and withdraw back to the Eye of Terror. Imperial propaganda immediately took charge of the situation. The unexplained Chaos withdrawal was painted as a shameful rout, brought about by the might of the Emperor's inexhaustible armies. The truth of the matter would not be made clear for another 10,000 years. For his part, Abaddon couldn't have been more pleased. The Long War proved to be a far more promising way to topple the Imperium than Horus's conventional invasion. The Despoiler thus began immediate preparations for his next Black Crusades. Each would follow a similar pattern, a lightning strike of unimaginable violence to cover a hidden objective that would bear fruit millennia later. The next major incursion would occur 816 years after the First Battle of Cadia. The Imperium, however, had finally realized the threat posed by the traitor legions. The High Lords of Terror had decreed that the forces of Chaos would never again threaten the Emperor's realm. A mighty bastion would be created all around the Eye of Terror to stop any future Black Crusade dead in its tracks. Dozens of worlds all across Segmentum Obscurus were thus fortified, creating a layered defense system that no foe could breach. If one world fell, many more would stand between the enemy and the throne world. The linchpin of this defensive network was the world of Cadia. It was around this previously unimportant world that Sigismund had perished in his attempt to hinder Abaddon's first Black Crusade. Imperial strategists quickly realized the reason behind the late High Marshal's choice of battlefield. Cadia stood in the center of the only stable corridor leading out of the Eye of Terror. Any force emerging from the Imperium would inevitably have to cross through Cadian space. In the centuries since the first incursion, Cadia had been transformed into the greatest fortress world in the entire Imperium. Its defenses were second only to Holy Terror or Mars. Mighty bastions, called casas, now dotted its landscape, and a militaristic society of proud warriors was created to garrison the Emperor's first line of defense against the encroaching darkness. Thus were the Cadian shock troops born. Though other regiments would distinguish themselves in their service to the God Emperor of mankind, none would ever match the flexibility of the Cadians. Every child born in the Fortress world would be taught how to fight before anything else. It was said that any Cadian child who could not field strip a lasgun by the age of 10 was born on the wrong planet. No other world in the history of the Imperium would ever be so exposed to the ruinous powers. While other war-torn planets, such as Armageddon, would have to repel the relatively straightforward threats of Xenos, the Cadians would be regularly set against demons, space marines, and all manner of warp monstrosities. For more than 10,000 years, Cadian defiance would inspire the servants of the Emperor across his vast realm. Besides mighty Cadia, other worlds stood out in the Emperor's newly created bulwark. The fortress on Nemesis Tessera was the second largest in the sector, and the gargantuan orbital shipyards at Bellis Corona ensured that the Imperium would be able to respond to a second incursion much faster than it did during the first Black Crusade. The Imperium had made good use of its time. Had he lived, Sigismund would have approved to see the servants of the Master of Mankind finally heed his advice. Unfortunately, both sides of the war had learned their lessons from the first Black Crusade. Abaddon had honed his strategies to perfection, carefully selecting the stratagems that had met with success, while discarding those that ended in failure. With the help of Draknien, he had also consolidated his power over much of the forces of Chaos. His armies would now be even larger, better equipped, and more organized than before. In 597 of the 32nd millennium, the Second Black Crusade emerged from the Eye. Abaddon aimed to test the Imperial defences and prod for any potential weaknesses he could exploit in a future crusade. The invasion began with a massive assault upon Cadia itself. Millions of heretics, demons, warp engines, and all manner of hellish creations were hurled at the Fortress world. Imperial propaganda would paint the siege as the main part of the war, yet as far as Abaddon was concerned, Cadia was not the principal objective. While the bulk of his forces besieged the Cadia Casses, smaller hosts were dispatched to circumvent the planet and strike at the rest of the Segmentum Obscurus. Abaddon knew he stood little chance of breaking through the sector's ring of fortifications, but he could severely weaken the Imperial defences by striking at Bellis Corona and Nemesis Tessera. Mighty though they were, both worlds were significantly softer targets than Cadia itself. Abaddon thus left command of the siege to his subordinates, while he led one of the smaller armies. Much like they had done during their first incursion, the War Master's forces began encouraging chaos uprisings across the sector. Warp cults that had remained dormant for centuries sprang from the shadows, ready to take control of their respective worlds in bloody coups. As far as these heretics were concerned, their savior had finally returned centuries after his first coming, and their time had finally come to greet the herald of the Chaos Gods and pave the way for his success. Though these rebellions seldom met with success, the mayhem they created severely hampered Imperial logistics. For every cult put down by the Adeptus Arbites or local enforcers, another one would emerge, bogging down precious resources and manpower and giving Abaddon the necessary strategic freedom to outmaneuver his enemies. While the siege of Cadia raged on, Abaddon's detachment approached the shipyards of Bellis Corona. The local defense forces were completely taken by surprise, thinking the War Master was still engaged in Cadia. The blow was devastating. Abaddon's lightning strike ravaged the precious orbital shipyards of the world, blowing apart dozens of docked Imperial warships that were key to the Segmentum's defense. The local Imperial war fleet had been gutted before it had managed to launch a single lance strike. Yet this devastating attack was but another diversion on Abaddon's part. While Imperial strategists were busy trying to salvage the situation evolving in the shipyards, the despoiler once again took control of his dependable bringers of despair. They landed on one of the remote moons orbiting Bellis Corona and put the terrified defenders to the sword. Abaddon, however, had not landed here for mere sport. The cadavers of the loyalists were collected and used as fuel for a sorcerous ritual meant to corrupt the moon to its very core. This ritual went unnoticed amidst the vast carnage of the Second Black Crusade, and would not be revealed for many centuries to come. When the time was right, Abaddon would use the cursing of Corona to unleash sorcerous plagues upon the Loyalists, weakening their defences for his future incursions. By the time Imperial reinforcements reached the beleaguered world, Abaddon was long gone. All the Loyalists could find would be the ruins of their irreplaceable dockyards and mountains of desecrated corpses offered up in sacrifice to the ruinous powers. To add to the Imperium's woes, the Black Legion was not the only Chaos warband slaughtering their way across the stars. The hated word-bearers would not let some upstart like Abaddon outshine them in the eyes of the gods. The Sons of Lorgar were the first to turn to the ruinous powers, and they meant to keep their favour through blood and sacrifice.
Jeez.
Fighting independently from the Despoilers' armies, they inflicted terrible casualties against what was left of the Imperial Navy in the sector. Making full use of their unrivaled mastery of demonology, they unleashed dreaded Chaos Defilers on the decks of Loyalist ships. The maddened demon engines ran amok through the corridors, slaughtering all before them and further disorganizing the Imperial response. For his part, Abaddon kept up his momentum. He exploited his superior mobility in the face of the ever-sluggish Imperium, and took full advantage of the chaos caused by the Word-bearers. His next target was the fortress of Nemesis Tessera, where another assault was called. Once again, however, this overt act of aggression only served to hide his true motivation. The Despoilers' spies had informed him of a secret inquisitorial stronghold on the planet. The servants of the Corpse Emperor had erected it to keep watch over the Eye of Terror and act as a demonic prison. This fortress was somehow also responsible for mitigating the effects of the warp on Nemesis Tessera. Abaddon meant to understand the reason behind this worrying ability and put a stop to it. If the Imperials were working on a device capable of nullifying the warp, the long war would be over before it could really start. The War Master successfully located the fortress, built deep beneath the ice. He led his Bringers of Despair in a daring raid that saw much of the garrison slaughtered. In the midst of the carnage, the Black Legionnaires stumbled upon peculiar arcane devices of unknown origins. Though their nature was uncertain, their effect was not. These jet-black pylons were ancient anti-warp artifacts, and were the reason behind Nemesis Tessera's warp resistance. The Imperium had long ago stumbled upon them and used them for their own benefit, despite barely understanding their value. One of the occupants of the stronghold called them hexagrammic eldritch needles, revealing the depth of Imperial ignorance. In truth, these were Necron pylons made of blackstone. This precious material could nullify the effects of the Immaterium. Aeons ago, the Necrons had dotted some of the planets around the Eye of Terror with such pylons. They had aimed to close the eye, though they had evidently failed in this endeavour. Nevertheless, the pylons were successfully keeping the eye from expanding millions of years later. The ignorant lackeys of the false emperor had been living near these priceless pylons for generations, oblivious to their potential. They lay under the earth, waiting for someone to finally activate them and put an end to the eye. Abaddon's instincts were correct. His raid on Nemesis Tessera had revealed the greatest objective of all. If he could locate those pylons and eradicate them one by one without arousing the Imperium's suspicions, he could hope to deliver the ultimate blow upon his enemies. Secrecy would be of utmost importance. If the Loyalists discovered the true nature of these pylons, the Eye of Terror would be closed. Yet, if he could successfully weaken the eldritch defences of Segmentum Obscurus, the warp anomaly would be free to expand, bringing about an age of chaos and endless war. Abaddon ordered his Bringers of Despair to bring down the needles with melter charges. Taking things one step further, Ezekiel freed the demonic prisoners of the fortress and let them run amok on the planet. The carnage they would create would serve as further cover for Abaddon's strategic moves. Once again, the Despoilers' plans had met with thundering success. Most importantly of all, however, the Imperium was none the wiser. The siege of Cadia would last for 5 years of gruesome, unrelenting attrition and horror. The Cassars would hold well, repelling every assault the traitors could launch. Meanwhile, across the Segmentum, the maze of fortifications would successfully repel the worst of the Chaos forces. As far as the Loyalists were concerned, victory belonged to them. The enemy had not managed to threaten Holy Terror and had been sent scurrying back to the warp, thanks to the might of Cadia's walls. Abaddon was not about to let his enemies know the error of their ways. Despite his reputation, the War Master was a patient man. If he had to wait 10,000 years for his plans to reach their fruition, he was more than happy to bide his time. In the meantime, the lackeys of the false emperor could celebrate their hollow victories. Slowly but surely, the Despoiler would chip away at the clay feet of the Imperial Colossus. When the entire rotten edifice would finally come crashing down, when the Loyalist dogs would choke on their cries of victory, when they would finally understand the purpose of the Black Crusades, Abaddon would be there to walk on the ashes. In the next episode of this series, we will talk about the 3rd and 4th Black Crusades. If you don't want to miss that, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members. whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.
It's so fascinating to me how he manages to do all these different things to help weaken the Imperium bit by bit. It's so interesting how he managed to continue to use subtle manipulation to get what he needs for these cults to have uprisings, to weaken the defenses and logistics, and basically, sure, they did a number on against chaos, but overall, Ezekiel Abaddon kept one step ahead because he knew that there was things that he discovered which were necessary for the long game, basically. And every little bit he managed to continue to weaken, to bring chaos and destruction. And no doubt, like, he did all this to make it assume that his motives are hidden. And it's both ingenious and manipulative, and just, he is a danger. But like, at the same time, there are other threats out there as well. Like, you saw Lorgar and the word bearers. They were trying to cause their own stuff across the galaxy as well. And you see all these other factions out there that are like pulling the Imperium's attention away, as like with the Eldar, with the Orcs, and the rising of the Necrons. But during this time period, I think it was about the Age of Strife, maybe, that was taking place. So not everything was fully operational to be able to completely keep everything protected in all these different sectors. They knew that the Eye of Terrors was dangerous, but they knew that they couldn't fully send everything there. They had to prop themselves up so that they can focus their other resources with defending against orc incursions and other chaos and Dark Eldar shenanigans, and it's so painful to like watch. And like, you think the Imperium is going to get the step ahead against Abaddon, but Abaddon's already 10 steps ahead of them without even realizing it. So this has just been fascinating. I've been really enjoying these videos. I think there's a couple left from what I see. So if I was to pull it up, yeah, there's only 2 more videos left that's been caught up basically with all the stuff. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you had a good time with it. And yeah, I'll leave a link for Wizards and Warriors up here. I'll leave another link in the description for the original video for you to check out without me commentating or just being in the corner over here, I guess. And you can check out the subscribe button and another video I have, and I'll see you again soon. Okay? So as always, Romans, salute.
If you like Romans content and wish to see more, like and subscribe to continue to support the channel.